Well, hello and welcome everybody to our Practice Vital meetup. We do this each month for those of you who have not been here before. It's really, you can think of it a little bit like office hours or something like that, where it's a chance to ask any questions that you have, and just learn from each other, learn from us, open-ended. But today we're also lucky to be joined by a guest who's not really a guest because she's been a Practice Vital customer for the past 2 years, Kim Hession here. And yeah, I'm excited to introduce her. Kimberly is the owner of Great South Bay Therapy, where she leads a team of around 16 clinicians. She's the co-owner of Coastal Practice Consultants, where she works with clinicians to help them build strong, sustainable practices. And she's benefited from using Practice Vital in her own practice since 2024. So she's joined us here today. She's volunteering to help us all and answer questions. It's always really nice to learn from a fellow practice owner who has a little more experience with it, or may have a little bit more experience or a different experience with it. So she's going to mostly focus on a few things that we came to based on things that people have asked us for in the past. So one is how her team introduced Practice Vital to their team, how they use the data to guide conversations with clinicians, how it's helped them build a more sustainable and transparent culture. But she is very approachable and eager to answer anything that's helpful for you all. So feel free to put any questions in the chat or just general topics that you hope she'll talk about. And then Kim is happy to go through those as we go. So if anything comes up, add those to the chat. But why don't we start with, first of all, thank you, Kim, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about how you came to introduce Practice Vital to your team?
Absolutely. So thank you again for the intro and for having me. Um, just a quick background. So Great South Bay Therapy is a group practice located here in New York. We're on Long Island. We're 16. Actually, I think we just onboarded two or three more, so we could be 18 plus at this point, almost 19 clinicians over 6 locations. And then in addition to our group practice, which is about almost 10 years old, our group practice, my business partner, Jennifer, and I also own Coastal Practice Consultants, which is really our passion in helping other clinicians like build their dream practice and learn systems and run programs and manage their team. So we know, all of you probably know how challenging it is to go from the clinical role to the management role. And so if there's any help or support or advice or tips or tricks I can provide, we're happy to do that because that's such a passion of ours that we actually created a whole company around it. Um, we, as we started to grow, we realized that not looking at the numbers was really just not an option. And our sort of haphazard way of doing it, which we thought was working, and when you're small, maybe it does, was starting to not really give the clarity that we needed. And I was reminded of that every time we met with our accountant. He would say like, well, I need to know what this office is doing, or how do you know the person you hired is driving numbers, or how do you know you can afford to offer benefits? And we'd be like, we just think we can. And that's not a satisfied that doesn't satisfy most accountants, as you can imagine. So we started to realize that we needed to really pay much closer attention to the data. And I honestly do not recall how I found Practice Vital, but believe me, I'm grateful that we did. And I know that it can be really overwhelming. I think a lot of us probably went into clinical work because maybe we didn't have the bug for accounting, or data or spreadsheets, but this software, as you know, makes it as easy as it possibly can be. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning it, but I think it has truly made a difference in how we practice and what we look at and how we make decisions, with our group. So if there's anything that we're doing that's working, I'm hoping to share that with you. And I just want this to be like crazy informal, so you can interrupt me. I'm not certain I can read the chat while I have my slides up. So like, just absolutely interrupt me with a question. My hope is to just kind of blow through some slides to give you context and some information, and then leave the rest of the time for us to chat. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah. And we can
Okay.
monitor the chat for you. So don't worry about that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so jump in anytime. Now I'm going to realize why my slides are not clicking. Okay, I'm a Google Meet person, so Zoom might take me an extra second. I mentioned I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that everything in both companies has grown with my business partner and good friend, Jen Flanagan. We have both been in solo practice for well over 24, 25, almost 30 years at this point. And about 10 years ago, we decided to make that informal, sort of helping each other out, formal, and created Great South Bay Therapy, which is our group practice. We do use, for reference, I forgot to put this in the slide, we use therapy notes. So that's where our data is coming from. We are a hybrid practice, mostly in person. So I think that's something to consider too when you're looking at data. Are you a virtual only practice? Are you in person? Because your numbers may need to look different if you're carrying rent and office expenses for leases and rents and furniture and utilities and things like that. You may need to look at numbers a little bit differently than if perhaps you're virtual only. So I really wanted to point that out too, that sometimes the way we create our targets depends on that location and perhaps even what that location is costing us. Um, I'm going to do this every time. I'm going to click the wrong thing. So Great South Bay Therapy in a nutshell, it's a seven-figure group practice, 18 clinicians, plus we have a dedicated biller and an intake coordinator, which I'll talk more about later. 6 physical locations, obviously hundreds of clients served every month. And then our other company, Coastal Practice Consultants, has also been around for many, many years. And here's where we just really want to support clinicians in building their own group practices. When we started a group practice, it wasn't a thing. We all probably remember like 15 years ago, it was pretty rare to see a private group practice. Most groups were community mental health. And now they're growing and growing and growing and very successful. But there's just not enough support in helping us learn how to grow and sustain all the changes in the industry. And I think Practice Vital has been an absolute key element in stabilizing and having a much clearer picture of like where you want to go with your practice or fixing anything that may not be going well, because it's a lot to keep track of. And I'm very grateful that we have tools like this to take a look at and give us the information we need to make good decisions. Um, some of the topics I'm just going to go over today is obviously creating a referral base. So if your retention levels are not where they are, one of the key tricks is let's look at your your referral strategies and your referral base. Um, Building your dream team, we want we want our clients to be happy and make progress, but we need our clinicians to be happy too. And data and numbers can sometimes look punitive. I know Tori and I were talking about how some practice owners are kind of struggling to like introduce this concept of data and numbers to their team because we don't want to be seen as, just like focusing on the numbers, and clinicians will push back sometimes and feel like, clients aren't numbers and this is not what we're in it for. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we introduce and how we talk to our team about that, because we really have a culture now where this information actually just promotes curiosity and training and not fear. So I'm hoping that that's something you can all take away. Retention strategies, we have some tips to share for that. Obviously, money mindset and growth, creating systems, and having the right software, which clearly this is a key element. One of my favorite quotes, and we use this a lot in our practice, everything is figure outable. There is never a shortage of obstacles or problems, right? We all know running a group practice, there's always going to be a new issue or a new problem that you didn't see coming. And so we are immediately trying to just calm everybody and go by the motto, everything is figure outable. This is actually a book written by Marie Forleo. Um, Data is not the enemy. Most owners are avoiding the numbers because the numbers look scary, especially if you're not sure what to do with them. But you cannot fix what you refuse to look at. So we just are encouraging people, don't stick your head in the sand, even though it can be very, very tempting. Numbers are information, and information is something we can work with. But I'm guilty of this too. I mean, there are definitely things that we kind of avoid looking at because we're not sure we have the skills or the energy or the time to fix it if we were to see a problem. So sometimes it's easier to stick your head in the sand, but we're really going to encourage you not to do that. Another book that I absolutely love for practice owners is Fix This Next by Mike Michalowicz. So he sort of uses as a metaphor the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is something that we used when we introduced Practice Vital and the concept of like KPIs and data and numbers to our team, because we were worried that the team would push back with the whole clients aren't numbers. This isn't what we're in it for. It's, the big bad owners are money hungry or something like that. Luckily, none of that happened. And this is one of the sort of concepts that we started with to say that everybody's familiar, we're all clinicians with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that without food, water, oxygen, nothing else matters, right? Nothing else, no other goals, no other wishes or dreams can happen if you don't have your basic needs, that bottom rung met. And what I think we were able to sort of translate based on, it's a very fascinating book, by the way, based on his metaphor is that when you're running a group practice, we all have dreams. We want our clinicians to be successful and happy and have a work-life balance. We want them to feel like they're being paid their worth. We want clients to keep coming back. We want referral partners to keep sending us clients, but we want beautiful offices or great software programs. Whatever it is that our dreams are for our practice, none of that can exist without sales. And the bottom line is sales is cash flow. And if there is no cash flow or you're not managing your cash flow, then there's no profit. And if there's no profit, then you're not reinvesting any of that money into new clinicians or promotions or training or supervisory leadership roles or anything like that. And so we were sort of able to say that this is something we truly believe in, both myself and Jennifer, that we feel like we're very coastal, right? So we sort of always use the metaphor of like a ship. Like we have this ship, but if we don't keep the ship afloat, none of the things that are important to us, client care, running groups, really creating cool niches, getting specialized training, none of those things can happen if the ship is sinking. And so I think it was something that they really understood. And I don't think this is something that is discussed, obviously, when you're in school, or even if you're pursuing training all the time, it's usually clinical training. We're not really pursuing business training. So cash flow has to happen first, just like we need oxygen before we can create fun systems or bring in great software or create promotions or give pay raises, or even provide pro bono services, right? If you want to be able to increase client accessibility and take some plans, perhaps that might not pay as much, or offer free services, or bring in interns, whatever it is your practice dreams are, none of it can happen without cash flow. If you don't have the lights on and you can't pay your rent, it just cannot happen. And I really believe that this concept immediately calmed everybody down because I don't know about you guys, but I think that when we start talking about numbers, sometimes our clinicians might immediately think we just want to line our own pockets. Would you agree that sometimes the idea of money can be misunderstood or somehow translated into something negative that it's not? Does this resonate with anyone? I just want to pause here for a second.
It does. And I'm always surprised that we're often not even talking about money. We're talking about clinical care data, metrics, right? But just the word metric can have that connotation. Even if we
Mhm.
don't even say metrics, it's just anything to do with the numbers, even when they don't have to do, like indirectly, they do have to do with cash flow. But directly, we're talking about how long did a client stay and did they get what they needed?
Mhm.
So I think there's a few different ways to kind of talk about these things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly it. We cannot provide services to clients and provide great care if you don't measure who's coming in, how long are they staying, all of those things need to be measured. But I do agree that I think when you say metric or numbers, clinicians immediately think money, right? And it's a much bigger story than that. But this definitely helped understand that our goal, that top level, is impact and client care and legacy. What are we doing for the industry as a whole? And those things are as important as any, if not the most important, but cannot happen without those base layers, right? And I would say that the tracking is those base layers. You can't know what you're doing or what you're doing is working unless you're tracking. So that definitely helped calm the idea, right, of why would we be measuring anything and why are we going to be sharing it with our clinicians and talking about it. Um, and we also shared this, that clinician happiness, right? A stable, well-run practice is a calmer place to work. We know that. If you're running around putting out fires all the time or worried about retention rates or numbers or referrals or income or rates from insurance, it creates anxiety. It's contagious. The anxiety is contagious. So a well-run practice where decisions are made with data, everybody's calmer. Promotions and growth. Obviously, we cannot promote people into roles that they deserve if you don't have an understanding of the needs, right? How many clients are coming in? Who needs training? Who needs more supervision? You need to be able to see that. And I think Practice Vital allows us to see those things. Benefits and raises, all of the things that benefit clinicians are decided upon or reviewed or discussed based on data. And of course, client care, which is obvious. So I think when we shared with our team that this is not just a numbers thing and it's not just a money thing, it actually impacts every area of the group practice. Um, I'll be honest, we didn't get any pushback. Nobody was like, I don't like this. This doesn't feel right. There was a little bit of panic when we started to share their quarterly reports. And I'll talk about how they responded to that and how we had conversations with them. So what we, as Great South Bay Therapy, what we're tracking is obviously retention. We're tracking churn. Something that's been really important to us is location, looking at our different locations. We recently made a pretty big decision to upgrade one of our locations in Garden City, Long Island, to a much bigger, larger office space. And it was going to be probably 2 to 3 times more costly than our current space. So we use the data to say, how are our clinicians doing there? Are we full? What kind of revenue are we bringing in? Are our clinicians, solid? Do they look like they're happy? Are they staying with us? Do we have room for more referrals in that location? And that helped us give us the confidence really to make the leap to that new location. And it's been very successful. So I don't know. I think we would have been winging it, to be really honest. Without this data, we would have just said, well, we think we can move or we think we can increase our rent. But looking at that data, especially location specific, helped us make the decision with a lot more confidence. Obviously, sessions completed, revenue, and no-show rate and things like that are very common KPIs that we use through Practice Vital. Couple of things that came up for us, some learning curve issues, which I just want to share. One I actually didn't put in here because it happened recently, and I'm just like going to be very vulnerable and share some of our earlier mistakes and one recent mistake. So I was looking at our bank account recently, and I thought, well, this is odd. Our numbers look a little lower than I would expect. I thought, well, maybe a lot of people are on vacation, maybe a lot of clients are not. And then I started looking, it's like, no, that doesn't seem right. It seems like everybody's timesheet is pretty typical. What is happening? And then this is really embarrassing, but I opened up my Practice Vital because that's the first place I'm going to go. And the number of overdue notes nearly knocked me out of my seat. So apparently, some of our clinicians have been having a really nice summer and they are working hard, but maybe got a little bit lazy with completing their notes. When you don't complete your note and therapy notes, then you can't bill, right? So if you can't bill, you're not going to get payments. So their timesheet, because we did not yet use, although I think I'm going to switch to using Practice Vital to drive my timesheets. I use a different method. They were all working, seeing their clients, putting in their timesheet, they're getting their payroll, but somehow the account looked a little lower. And that immediately answered my question of why does this not look right or not feel right? And it's because the number of overdue notes is more than I have ever seen it in 10 years. So now we need to start immediately called on my clinical supervisors. And I said, you need to start calling everybody. Everybody needs to just come right back into their office or grab their laptop and complete these notes. I understand summer's a little less structured and there's a lot going on, but that immediately explained why something didn't feel right. So the correction was clear. They need to finish them by the end of the week. And then those claims will be able to go out, and then our bank account may look more normal. So I have created or sort of now have an automatic habit of if something doesn't feel right, go look at the data. And it's almost always explainable, trainable, and figure outable, right? There is a solution for that. A few other things that came up recently, and I know Kevin was so kind to help me figure out something that didn't look right. I had a clinician who was showing sky high cancellations, um, and it also didn't seem right. That's not been her history. Then we realized that she had taken a 2-week vacation, well deserved, but rather than deleting her sessions in therapy notes because they were not scheduled, they were not going to happen, everybody knew she was going to be away, she canceled them. So for 2 weeks, she's a full-time clinician. She was just canceling them in therapy notes, thinking it really didn't make much of a difference, but it did show up in her data as looking like really sky high cancellations, like it was a clinical issue. I mean, I guess it is a clinical issue, but it really became just a training issue. Again, this is explainable. It's like, wait a minute, she doesn't have that many cancellations. She's on vacation. But we realized there was a gap, and we learned pretty quickly that there was a gap in our training, that she's a little bit newer. She's only been around maybe a little bit less than a year. But I don't know that we ever really explained that when you take a vacation, we need you to delete those appointments, not cancel them because it's going to show up different, right, in the data.
Can I
So,
ask a
yeah,
question about that? And maybe
yeah.
you might have some insight too. So we have chosen to like leave cancellations during planned time out of the office because it kind of tells part of the clinical story, just tells part of the story of what's going on. And some of that was like based on, or I remember like an old phone call with our like local board to be like, should we be deleting those? Should we be keeping those? Like it kind of tells the story. It kind of has pieces of their treatment plan along in there. Um, so we always, I guess, moving into PracticeVital more recently, we were looking at it from the lens of we just need to like, what does the story tell, right? Oh, you're high cancellations this month, or the practice feels high. Like what was going on, and kind of doing a little bit of like reverse looking at it and be like, oh, it kind of makes sense. We had so and so on vacation, and so was sick for 4 days or something, right? But it does throw off the numbers. But so I guess I'm just Tori. Do you see practices doing it one way or the other, or because it definitely messes with, your target
I
figures.
think, yeah, so great question. I think all that matters is that you do it consistently across the practice because we don't really care how you benchmark compared to a standard that we put in there so much, given that it could be vacation time that's approved. It's more that you want to know if there are anomalies across your team or if there's a percentage that's driving something else. So if this clinician is canceling more often on their clients, are their clients then canceling more often on them? And do they start to lose them? So it's really so that you can tell a story of what that cancellation does to client care and to the practice. Um, I'd say people do it both ways. Some are like, we never want to delete appointments in the EHR. We don't want them to ever think that's an option. So it's not. Other people say if it's approved time off, we delete the appointments or have them delete them. Again, I think it's just as long as you're doing it consistently.
Because the other thought with that is like we use simple practice actually. So there's like the clinician canceled. So if
Hmm.
you delete it, we're also not getting a picture of how often the
Correct.
clinician is canceling.
The way I happen to do it in my practice, I don't know that this is the best way or the right way for any,
Yeah.
but the way I do it is if it's really approved, planned in advance time off, I say delete the appointments. And if it's like last minute or sick time, emergency, they change something on a client, I want them to mark that. I still think you might, I mean, I kind of, when I think more about it, I sort of think, I don't know, maybe I like it the other way where I just know all time how often they're canceling because then I really have the full picture of it doesn't really matter if it's approved or not. It's how
Often
often
they're out
is
of the
care
practice.
disrupted, right?
Ah,
So I really, again, I don't know that there's a
okay.
right way. I think it's just the consistency.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding too, and I'm not an expert in this yet, but it did begin a conversation that you can create different, like billable cancel, non-billable cancel, and those can be tracked differently.
Yes.
So my practice is in process of like making big decisions around that. But I think one thing we did land on is that if the session was not ever scheduled because of a vacation, either the client or the clinician vacation, that it just isn't scheduled and it doesn't get deleted, billable or not. Because I,
Mhm.
I agree with you. I do want to also see how many times a clinician is canceling something um, versus a client canceling. And even that has nuance, right? Billable cancel less than 24 hours,
Right.
non-billable, something like that. So
Yeah.
This does have the ability to decipher all of that. It's just you have to first decide like what do you want to track and measure as a
Yeah.
practice, and then figure out how to best do that.
Yeah.
Um, it was honestly, it's really interesting. I do feel that I learn something new all the time because, well, A, it's evolving. Practice Vital is about evolving, but also when you really look at something, I put this kind of message on the bottom is like sometimes I thought it was tracking something that it wasn't. And you either have to adjust your targets or your expectation or adjust how something or your codes or things like that.
That for
Um,
us, that's like we struggle with the retention one. And I know I think it comes up regularly because the way retention is tracked is a little different than like how my brain wants to track retention for like longer term clients, et cetera. But I have a follow-up question I can leave till the end if we have time on that.
Yeah, we also had that. So it looked like some of our best clinicians had lower retention because they had kept and retained all of this. They didn't have a new intake,
To
right?
then track the retention of the new intakes. Yeah.
Right, right. So either we would go back further, months or
Yeah.
years, right, and see it that way. Or, and Tori, correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but you can also have a different tracking system for retention that does not include intake codes. Is that accurate?
I don't know if I want to speak to that because I'm not sure,
Okay.
but I think the way you just said it makes the most sense
Just
of,
go back further.
yeah, I mean, you can do all-time retention. So you can do retention from 2025. You could do retention from the day that the clinician started till up till today. It's really just putting the dates in the time frame that you're selecting.
Mhm.
So you can do it the way your brain wants to do it. You just have to put the dates in.
And you can look at the clients. So that also helps. If it looks
Hmm.
like there's low retention, but if you click on the caseload, you'll see
Hmm.
that gives
Right,
you a much clearer understanding of where each client is
right.
um,
Hmm.
and where they
Yeah,
are in that counting up to that 8 sessions or 12 sessions or however your targets are.
yeah.
Um, it takes practice. I mean, I'm by no means an expert in Practice Vital, but it has helped us tremendously. And when you start to see changes that are positive, naturally you want to learn more. Like I want to get more nitty gritty. I want to learn more things. I want to learn more, more of how I can track something or really parse it out or be more specific than just like generalized. That's how we started, just looking at general numbers and figuring out what story they tell. You start to get really excited about the level of detail that it can provide you. But it's a learn. We have to learn. We can. That's what I think these spotlights have been really helpful. I've gone back and watched quite a few of the ones from the past that I wasn't able to attend, and it's just incredibly helpful. Also, just going through the Practice Vital website, you have so many demos in there and things like that that I think have been really helpful. And I went through it with a fine-tooth comb several months ago, and it's like you have to do it every once in a while. You forget. So so we do let our data help us make big decisions. I mean, the bigger you get, the bigger decisions, or the bigger impact your decisions really have. I mentioned before, it helped us make a big real estate decision on whether or not we could really afford to expand in a particular location. And I will tell you, since we've done that, not only do we have happier clinicians because the space is larger and beautiful and in a better location, our clients are giving really positive feedback. We're able to hire. It's really nice when you can hire someone and say, hey, this is where you're going to be working. And it's this really beautiful office versus the very tiny office we were coming from. All right. So it gives you um, benefits and not just happier clinicians, but maybe even with hiring and definitely happier clients when they're more comfortable. Parking's better, the lighting is better, the way to get in and out is better. So obviously that's going to make everything better, but we could not have made that decision without looking at the data from that location.
On the flip side, I met with somebody yesterday who was looking at location data and she was shocked that their in-person space she thought was, 80% utilized or something like that. She was like, wow, we're doing very little session volume there compared to telehealth. And truly shocked. She said to her admin who was on the call, like, did you know that? And they were like, no. So they're having to make a decision now. Does it make sense to be kind of wasting money on space that isn't being used? And so she can just work a lot smarter. So I think that's something I'm glad you're making this point that a lot of people miss. We get caught up in the clinician performance piece and forget like this is to help you make smarter decisions that are going to save you money over time. It's not just another expense.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the sometimes there's a gap in what we think is going on versus what is. Something that I'll often do with clinicians, and I'll say, like, do you have an idea of what your average, session completion is in a week? And they'll say, yeah, I think I'm seeing like 25, 26 clients on average, because in their mind, they might have a caseload of 30, and they're thinking, well, it feels overwhelming and I know I'm working really hard. And so I must be seeing 25, 26. And I'll say, well, actually, the data shows that you're averaging like 16 or 17. So you're not even meeting your targets. And they're shocked. And then we have a conversation of, why does it feel like 25 when it's actually 18? Are there clients that are, scheduling and canceling constantly? Are you chasing people? What is what is happening? Are you behind in your note? Are you feeling overwhelmed that it feels like 25 when it's really 16, 17, or 18? And that becomes a training issue. And it has really cleared up a lot when you can show somebody that the numbers are lower and it's not punitive. It's like, hey, we have a fee, we're kind of fee for service. So they get paid per completed session. So not only does it feel like 25, but their bank account's not reflecting 25, and that doesn't feel great either. So then we really launch into training and supervision to say, let's see if we can get you closer to your target so that you're not feeling, so at least if you're going to feel like it's 25, that it should be 25. And then your paycheck will reflect that as well. And we can also talk about perhaps referring out or discharging clients that are not getting the best care and creating a lot of energy draw. And so it really never becomes like a punitive, you're not meeting your target. It's like, how are you feeling? What is it that you think you're doing? Let's look at what the data is and help you get to where you want to be. And sometimes that conversation has resulted in changing a target where someone says, you know what, I just don't even want 25 to be my target. I'd rather go part-time. I don't need benefits. Can I make my target 15? And we do, not every practice would be okay with that, but we do have part-time and full-time roles. So if somebody wants to change their target, we do that and we see how it feels for them. Um, so yes, it is helpful for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the training, the supervision, but even real estate decisions, I think, came from this data. I will say our practice and our clinicians now, they do view this as like more of a curiosity. They're more intrigued. They do not present with fear when I tell them that I'll be sending quarterly metrics. So something that we do is we send every quarter, we download each clinician's quarterly metrics report and we send it to them in an email. And I think I have a sample of like what I say in the email. Um, it's always framed as support. We're here to look at this data as information and make changes as necessary. Everybody sees their own numbers. We don't obviously share other people's numbers, but there's no mystery. There's no feeling like we're coming at you. There's no secret scorecard. It's always a conversation. It helps us all look at what's behind the number, right? Instead of judging it. Sometimes we can even predict for certain clinicians that we bring on board. And I don't know if you guys are seeing this in your practice, but we work with a lot of children and teens. So sometimes we'll get a lot of school social workers or school psychologists with their mental health license. They want to come and do some part-time work. And we almost are able to predict with certainty that they will have really strong retention for about 5 to 6 sessions and then almost drop off. And we tell them that when they're onboarding, so that they don't panic. Why am I losing clients? And we tell them that, and by the way, I'm a school social worker as well. So I've been in a school district for 24 years. That the pace that they are used to, that quick assess, put out fires, refer, tends to follow them into practice, and they don't quite yet know how to slow the process down and do longer term treatment planning and longer term interventions. So almost always, even though somebody might be coming from one of those systems and they have a lot of experience, we're going to say, hey, we kind of predict that you may have a retention problem early on, and we're going to help you fix it. And they're like, oh, no, 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 I've been working with kids and families for all this time. And almost without fail, there's a drop off. But we don't panic because we know why, that they're just wired to do things a lot more quickly. Their interventions are faster, their assessments are faster, because that's how they are clinically in those settings. So it becomes just a supervision and a training conversation.
Can I add
So,
one thing to that,
go ahead.
Kim? Is we're really talking a bit about where clients drop off, the drop off point,
Mhm.
and that's one of our newer insights as well. So if you click into your insights tab, you can see what is the most common drop off point for different clinicians. And usually practice wide, it's after session one, just because you are going to have a lot of clients who decide after that first session whether or not they stay. But if you look at that as a coaching opportunity to know this clinician tends to lose people at session four, five, six, or seven, that's very different clinically than somebody who loses somebody always at session one or session 10. So you're using it as information to help them grow.
Absolutely. It's a much different clinical story, right? And a much different approach with supervision. Um, so that's actually been a little bit fun to look at that number and sort of predict so that the clinician doesn't panic, but also we know how to fix it. So that's been incredibly helpful. We do send a message. So this is just an example. I'd be happy to share my actual email, but this is pretty much the crux of it, that every quarter we will go into Practice Vital, download each clinician's report as a PDF, and we send them an email that here are your, quarter one, quarter two, metrics. And it's a little bit longer than this phrase, but it basically will say these reports help us see data in real time, discuss issues quickly and accurately so that you reach your practice goals. All data is open to interpretation. This is here to show what needs attention, and any questions and concerns, we're going to reach out and schedule one-on-one time. In addition, we also, and Tori, I don't know if you can help people find this because I could not find it the other day. You had like a PDF of the definitions. I couldn't figure out how to find that again.
Yeah, we
But
can link it. We've got different guides that say it, and then
Mhm.
the metrics glossary as well.
That's what it was. So we actually include that so that they understand what is defined as what. And then we simply just check on them during supervision. Hey, you got your report. Anything surprise you here? Is there anything that you think we should work on or target? Are there target goals you want to change? Here's what's concerning me. This is how I think we might want to fix it. So it's not been a situation where anybody's having a negative response to this. Um, and I think emphasizing that everything is open to interpretation is important, right? Like I said, if my clinician with the really high cancel rate saw her report, I think she'd say, "Oh my gosh, this doesn't sound right." It's like, well, you were on vacation. We just coded it wrong. So it was easily explainable. How we set our targets are minimums, not ceilings. We always tell our clinicians they're welcome to have more sessions, but we do have minimums for full-time clinicians and part-time clinicians. This is just what our practice does. Every practice has their own. And I think sometimes there was a point where our clinical supervisors were not consistently not meeting their target. And when we took a really hard look, it's because they were just doing an enormous amount of supervision. And then we decided that for those clinical supervisors, we needed to lower the expectation of their individual sessions because we really wanted them to focus on supervising the other clinicians. So it wasn't that they were doing it wrong and they were in the red. It was like, wow, this is happening to both of you. What's going on here? And they're saying, well, what do you want us to do? Add more clients or add more supervision sessions? And so we had a discussion. We changed their goal. Now they're in the green. So these goals and targets are obviously always flexible and able to be changed based on what you need. I think. So a couple ways to talk to clinicians about retention if you are seeing practice-wide concerns or individual clinician concerns. Some of the best tips that have worked and really moved the needle for us have been nurturing our referral partners, right? So we know that when clients come to us through trusted referral partners, they are more likely to stick, as opposed to if they're just kind of cold calling from like the website or ZocDoc or a Psych Today profile. And that's because our referral partners have a better idea of whoever they're referring, what their needs are, and they're sort of already matching us right to that clinician. Yes. Is there a question? I saw a hand go up.
Kevin, did you know your hand is up?
Sorry about that. Misclick.
Oh,
Oh, um, So we sort of explain to other practice owners like the metaphor in sort of like online dating, right? So if you're using a dating app and you're swiping left and right and you go on a blind date, like we don't know. Maybe it sticks and it's amazing, and maybe it's just not a good fit, and you kind of know within the first hour this person and I were not compatible. But if a good friend sets you up on a blind date with a coworker that they've been working with for 10 years and they've been your best friend for 15 years, you know that that's more likely to perhaps even lead to a second date or more interest, right? So it's just that when you have referral partners that really understand your practice and how you operate, you're going to have better retention numbers. So we do encourage people to nurture those community referral partners, building solid intake procedures, whether your clinicians are doing intakes or even intake coordinator. Really setting the stage and setting expectations has moved the needle quite a bit in terms of clients that stick around. Our intake coordinator spends a lot of time letting clients know what to expect when they come into the practice. Our clinicians reiterate all those expectations. We even have like a welcome packet that that all clients will get, sort of really having an understanding of how we work and what our expectations are around canceling, scheduling, treatment planning, all of those things. And we obviously invest a lot in training and content for therapists. So that might mean courses, book clubs, supervision, clinical supervision topics, so that our therapists have the tools that they need to keep clients making progress toward their goals, using new creative interventions, and having successful outcomes. So retention numbers have improved when you focus on some of these issues. We already talked about all this. Building, again, solid intake. I think that's key, setting expectations. The other thing is that clients will often ask, can I come like whenever or every other week? One tool that has really helped us, or I guess trick, sort of not a trick, but strategy, I should say, is asking clients to commit early on to weekly, at least for 4 to 6 weeks, just to get off the ground. And we say we understand scheduling, money, all of the obstacles and barriers to treatment, but it is very hard to build a proper treatment plan and assess someone's needs and land on like agreed upon goals when it's so fragmented in the beginning. Once you're cruising and they need to go every other week, that's fine. We also find that if we can have them coming in and commit to that regularity in the beginning, that they'll often stay that way. But that even if they do need to drop to less than weekly, they're able to still make clinical progress. So that's something that we emphasize very strongly with new clients. Setting expectations early. This is what I just kind of mentioned. And again, really good supervision, using the data, using the numbers to have almost included in every single supervision session. If a clinician tends to go to supervision and say, okay, I'm really struggling with this case, one of the first things our supervisors are trained to do is say, okay, before we get into the clinical piece of it, are they coming regularly? How long have they been your client? What's the scheduling like? Because sometimes a clinician might think that they're having like a content or intervention struggle when it's an attendance problem. So we are looking at numbers and data before we even advise in a supervisory role. And we do obviously put a high value on our clinical training, which helps the numbers, of course. Okay, what is this? High churn, numbers to next step. Okay. If we're seeing a high churn at one location, we're digging into our scheduling and our fit, then we're going to coach our team appropriately, obviously. Gaps between sessions completed and paid. This was something I noticed today, or not today, recently, like what's going on with our payroll? What is happening with the bank account and the payroll? Well, the notes are overdue. No claims went out and therefore didn't get paid. No shows for a clinician. Sometimes something's going on with them. Sometimes it's just the time of the year. We work with a lot of kids and teenagers and kids. So the first week or two in September, we're going to have a lot of dropouts. We're going to have a lot of cancellations. We're going to have a lot of no-shows. It's just back to school craziness. And we know due to our population that that's normal and expected. So if we see lower numbers, we're not going to worry. It's explainable. So really the last note, and I'm going to just leave the rest of the time for questions or conversation, is we're very beachy and coastal over here. Keep your toes in the sand, not your head, as tempting as it may be. Track everything is figure outable once you can see it. Act on it, take numbers into supervision and training, and own it. Your cash flow is your responsibility, and everyone rides on it. It's not just owners benefiting from retention and cash flow and numbers and location revenue. Everybody benefits. Owners benefit, the team benefits, your admin staff benefits, and more importantly, and most importantly, your clients benefit, because we can't provide any care if we're not up and running. And that's pretty much it. I don't even think I have maybe one other slide. I can leave this, or Tori can send it later. We don't really send a newsletter weekly. It's more like quarterly. If you're interested in tips from Coastal, that's a QR code, and that is my phone number and my email. If you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer anything for you guys. So
Thank you
any
so much.
questions?
We will also share that in our follow-up email so people can get in touch with you, Kim. This was
Great.
super, super helpful so far. Thank you.
No, I'm happy to do it. Is there anything that popped out for anybody that they think they want to go back and like look at or track or change or maybe take action on?
I was just going to ask a little bit, like, again, we're starting to roll out. We do have the clinician access, so they're seeing it as well. But we did, like, we're kind of in our first third between the 30, 60 day of having our team look at numbers, and our clinical director meets with them during a standing meeting she has already. But we had them start with like their rebooking rate and their cancellation rate. Just like start looking at those, like see what you see, like just starting the process rather than like, hey, look at all of these metrics week one. But we're going to be adding in like their cancellation rate next. So we're kind of like slowly adding on, but just thoughts on how you may do that with your team, or kind of the ramp up to really having them own more by the end of a 90-day period is what our goal is. But yeah, thoughts on just kind of that onboarding the clinicians with getting familiar with it so it's not overwhelming or scary, or again, just feels like number crunching when that's not what it's all about. We know those numbers create the care we want. So
Well, I know for us, we typically start if there's like a new feature or a new target that we're going to look at, we always start with like, hey, we're learning it too.
yeah.
We want to understand if we're going to start really taking hard looks at cancel rates, then we're going to make sure I'm going to call PracticeVital. I'm going to read the blogs. I might check in with Tori or Kevin and say like, am I coding this correctly? Like we want to just say we're going to start tracking this, but we're not going to hold the numbers as truth until we know we're doing it correctly, first of all, right? So that is a little bit of a slow on ramp, right? So they just are like, okay, they're going to be looking at it, but no one's gonna hold these numbers as hard evidence until they get a better handle on, are we coding it right? Are we tracking? Do we all understand systemically how to cancel appointments or how to delete them, or when we should be doing either, to get like some system practice wide. So it's sort of every single new target or feature that we start to talk about is always like there's like an on ramp period of time where
Mhm.
we're just kind of practicing, for lack of a better word, of like looking at the numbers and seeing what story they tell and making corrections. One thing we looked at was rebook. Why are none of my clinicians rebooking anybody? That doesn't make any sense. Well, we happen to use two calendars. So our clinicians have their calendar booked 2, 3 weeks out in a Google Calendar for my admin to my intake coordinator. So they weren't in a great habit of putting those sessions into therapy notes until they were almost occurring. So if PracticeVital is pulling from therapy notes, it looks like we have a terrible rebook when that's not accurate, right? So now the training is, guys, you have to put them in therapy notes, 2 or 3 weeks out, those things. Otherwise, they're not being pulled correctly. So whatever it is, if it's the cancel rates you want to look at or the rebook or the churn, it's always kind of a practice round in the first few weeks that we're looking at it.
I've also found a lot of practices get into better workflows because of Practice Vitals. So, for instance, everyone's rebooking in their own way. And once they realize, oh, this clinician has a 55% rebook rate, what are they doing? They said, oh, they're doing it in their own notebook, but that's actually a problem because then there's no visibility on behalf of the practice. And so they now streamline it where everyone, as long as they're a current client, they have a next appointment in the books that everyone can see. So it helps everybody from a compliance standpoint and a retention standpoint to change these behaviors.
I think another really strong point I didn't mention is that we do include our team in these conversations. What data do you want to see? what do you think is the best way to handle cancellations or the no-shows? What do you want to see tracked? So they're invested in how we track things or the systems we create in order to be tracked, and that makes it a little bit easier. And sometimes they have ideas I didn't think about that make perfect sense. Then we make changes. Go ahead. Somebody else had a hand up.
Rachel.
Thank you. This conversation has just opened up a lot of questions for me, and I probably need to book some time with you, Kim. But I think something I'm running into is, for the most part, my practice was like they were anxious, like, oh no, my numbers, that sort of thing. But the majority of them really got on board and found it kind of like morbidly interesting. Um, and but I do struggle with a couple clinicians, and I've really struggled with the approach on it. And that is when, with these clinicians, I can say they have very long-standing clients, but they're inconsistent.
Mm.
And so they're not weekly, they're not consistently biweekly. And so their pushback on the metrics was like, well, it's not really a cancellation. There's always like a legitimate reason the person isn't booking
Mhm.
weekly or with some like regularity, right? And that's been just as a supervisor and a practice owner, that's been a difficult thing for me to kind of approach or know how to approach
Mhm.
broach.
So one thing that we've done, we've had that similar issue. The insights, that some of the newer insights will actually, and Tori, you can tell me which button it is because I don't have it pulled up. That'll show a clinician's, like maybe it's their cancel or the sort of the inconsistencies and how many spots they should be booking to land at their target. So one
Right.
example in my practice is we have a clinician who does adults only. She does not work with children. She's a couples therapist, and she consistently hits her 25-week, sessions a week. Sometimes she goes over. And to do that, she probably needs a caseload of 28. Literally, nobody cancels. They come every week.
Mm,
However, these are obviously highly motivated couples that want to go in and get help.
yeah.
Whereas somebody who's working with a teenage athlete,
Hmm.
and we have clinicians who really kind of focus in that area, they're going to have a ton more cancellations because these kids, oh, we just made playoffs, we're moving to here, or I have a travel week, this game, and oh, our game went into overtime, I'm not going to make it. We know that clinician to hit 25 might have to have a caseload of much higher, 30, 35, and they may need to book more. They may need to book 30 sessions to land at 25.
Hmm.
So you could use that to say there's nothing wrong if those clients are still making progress and there's a really strong clinical relationship, but we don't want those clients to go anywhere. But those clinicians still need to meet a certain target, and that just
Right.
might mean that they need more sessions booked or a higher caseload to land at that.
Yeah.
What does that make sense?
It totally does. I think maybe that is like the hard conversation I need to have is like, that's fine if you have kind of like these floater clients, but then if you want to hold that spot for them, you're going to have to open up a spot somewhere else.
Right.
And I think it probably points to kind of more of an overall maybe our client a suspicion I have of like our clients feeling like they're getting enough value from the session.
Mm-hmm. No, it's understandable. We do have conversations around clients who are sort of less than consistent. Um, they just may lose their spot, and they go on sort of like what we call an as needed or flex plan for a
Right.
while, and we allow them to do that for about 2 months while we track, did they really ever come in? Was it once in 2 months? Did they actually come in pretty consistently once every 2 to 3 weeks in those 2 months or 3 months? And then we make a clinical decision about that. So we actually
Hmm.
have a couple like letters that go to clients to say, I can tell scheduling's been really challenging. We're going to put you on our flex plan. So
Hmm.
you call me in the beginning of the week to set up an appointment, but unfortunately, your 4:30 spot on Tuesdays is not going to be available. It may
Right.
be at some points, but that'll be determined weekly. So there's
Right.
some clinical work, and then they don't take up those prime time spots. Again, we work with a lot of working parents and kids and teens, so those afternoon and
Yeah.
evening spots are really valuable, and we want people who to have access who need the spot.
Totally. Totally.
This is where,
That
sorry, one quick thing up there
please.
is, and this is where grouping clinicians can be really helpful because if you group them by, let's say, adolescent therapists in your settings and you make that their type, then you can see things like, is this an anomaly cancel rate among people who are doing the same work or seeing the same population?
Right.
Or is that really normal for that same group? Because clinicians can come up with reasons for everything, but that's why we need the data. Because if we just go based
Yeah.
on them saying, oh no, I have this kind of different clientele, you can say, well, that may be true, but also some people in the practice are able to maintain a 15% cancel rate with the same population. So let's think if
Yeah.
there's another reason that could be leading to this.
Right. Oh, I like that idea. Okay, so grouping. Um, I was curious, one of Kim's things at the beginning was like, I think like referral flow. And I'm wondering if there's a way to track like averages of referral flow and things like that in Practice Vital or something that you've found in the practice. I think that's something where I'm like, don't I have a good referral flow? I mean, I don't know what industry average is. I don't, yeah.
In terms of conversion rate, are you saying for or by referral source?
Good question. I mean, so we have Google Ads. So, yeah, there's like conversion rates that I know we can track. But I think just in general, for a practice our size, how many people are actually booking? Maybe that's it. New intakes is sort of what I'm asking of like average of new intakes. What should we shoot for?
Yeah, and so much depends on how well you retain them. Because
Right.
some practices I see, they can sustain a clinician's caseload with 40 clients for the year. And
Yeah.
other people, it's like 120. And so
Yeah.
it really, that's why retention is so important because if you're bleeding through clients, it's going to be a
Right.
totally different number of intakes.
Right. Right. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Can I
Thank
ask
you.
a quick question on retention before we lose the time here? In the insights, under the client drop-off points, there's a section in that first drop down where it says where clients most drop off practice wide. So within that data, it does share, like for us, an average client attends so many sessions, right? And it gives us that, like that. I love that. I love seeing that number. Is there somewhere else besides in here that we can play around with that number? And how? Because I don't think I have found like,
We do have we have in the retention report, it shows you slightly different information, which is why we built this separately a little bit. So it
uh,
will show the average number of sessions per clinician per client. So you can do a compare clinician view and look down at the table view, and that will show like, Joe keeps clients on average 5.6 sessions. This one was more meant to say where do clients most often drop off? So a little bit of a different, we're trying to give you kind of all the like mean, median, mode, all of that.
yeah, but it gave me that information. So you're saying, so it's from, you said the retention report.
Yeah. So if you go
Okay.
to reports on the left navigation and click on retention, you will see the retention report, and then it's in the table view below. It will say average sessions per client, and that is for whatever time frame you choose. So if,
Oh,
it also depends on how many intakes they've had is going to factor into some of that. So just that's why we include how many intakes
okay.
are there as well. And then there's a practice average number,
Yeah,
which,
that's super helpful.
yeah,
Okay.
for the total practice.
And
Was
then if
there
I was
something else you were looking to do with that number? Yeah,
For
maybe
me,
that's what you're.
no, I think I've just been looking at like what's our average retention for the practice because the way that retention is tracked is based on that intake situation. So to me, that doesn't feel like the way my brain wants to say true retention is like what's our average. It feels like a helpful number, right? So I can go back and say, hey, we are hitting our goal. Like this just showed me we were hitting our goal of like our goal is 12 sessions, not 8. And so we actually have like 12.15, which means, wow, we got there. Now, some clients are going to be less, some we've had for years, and that's going to be the average. But I do like that's a helpful number for me to know. That I think I wasn't quite getting that from like the basic retention tracking because of the way the intakes drive that number. So this is super helpful for me. Thank you.
Great. We are past the hour, so I just want to let everyone know that in case you have clients or anything else. But we will send out the recording. Kim is welcome or happy to help if anyone wants to reach out to her. We are here at support at Practice Vital. And the last thing is we will share the next dates for the monthly meetup, but we're also starting a 6-month training program that we are offering for free to Practice Vital customers, where I will be leading a different topic each month. And you can sign up for the whole series. Different people on your team can join, and we'll share more information about that in the next week.
Sounds awesome.
Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.